Welcome back, and again, thank you for spending part of your New Year's Eve with us here at RFL. The panel is drinking during the break, so we'll see how this goes. I kid.
No, you're not.
Well, what's in the cup? Now let's talk about the campaigns and elections of 2013. As I said here, it's going to be a lot different in this coming fall when obviously all of Congress is up and some other key statewide races will be as well. But we did have some very interesting races both in the city and at the state level here. We saw some good, some bad, and some ugly. So we ask our table now. And Dominic, I start with you. Who made which list and why?
I'm looking at the campaign of Bill de Blasio becoming mayor of New York, but I don't know, Richard, if this is good or bad as we go into 2014 with just a few hours left. And here's why I say this. De Blasio was not vetted. He was not vetted. That's a big no-no when you want to be mayor of New York, because it's going to happen one way on the front side or it's going to happen the other way. Guess what? He's mayor now, officially, what, a few hours away. Yeah. And once that happens, reporters as of right now are out there looking into his personal life.
But just think about it, Dominic.
He's probably
on the good
sworn
side,
in, by the way.
If we're talking just on a campaign, though, the idea, let's be a little fair, this comes kind of under the Boston Marathon thing.
Okay.
That a white guy could
It's
trot
kind of
out
offensive.
a kid with a giant
It's
afro
kind of
and
offensive,
say,
to be
he's my
honest with
son,
you,
right? And that was the thing that got a lot of people who weren't really invested in this, that doesn't follow like the five of us, to say, I want that guy.
Well, it's a good thing, but it's a bad thing. One, I really feel it's offensive to the African-American community, because you're just saying, look at my kid with his afro. And it worked, to Mr. de Blasio's
Time
credit.
out, though. The black community voted for him overwhelmingly,
Sure
and they had a black candidate to choose from in the primary.
Richard, I've been down this road before, and here's the problem. When you push your kids up front as a candidate, like Rudy Giuliani, that didn't end pretty. No. As his kids got older and they got into mischief like every kid does, it becomes page one news. Giuliani's daughter, the shoplifting issue, his son playing golf down at Duke, I believe Duke, being kicked off the team. Already it's happening to de Blasio's kids. What's going to happen?
Let's go back to de Blasio for 1 second on just the campaign itself. We sat here at this table in July, and I said he was the black candidate. And Lou at that time was doing ads on black radio stations. And you and I you were like, wait a second, Thompson's the black candidate. Thompson never got the message out. And I think, I picked de Blasio too as far as the best campaign. I mean, here I'm sitting here with a Republican tie on. I've got my elephants from my stepmother up here on my tie. But he
Way
ran.
To plug that guy.
Close up, please.
But I felt that what he did was they stayed on message, they stayed on plan. The staff, the manager, and everybody else had been interviewed about what they did and why they did it.
But
it was a magnificent campaign. But he ran
was
his
it
son
an
out there.
indictment on the field, or was it really an affirmation?
That's what I was thinking. More of the rest of the candidates lost this race as opposed to de Blasio winning.
Yes, staying on message didn't win this for him. That's not what won it. Anthony Weiner cost all the others.
But think about it. De Blasio got in this race, and Weiner wasn't in the race yet. And when Weiner came in the race, the campaign had to make a decision. What do we do and how do we do it? They did not veer off drastically from where they were at that point. They commented on it.
This was the normal vote in New York City. I think everybody forgets that. This is a city that is 6-1 Democratic. And it was a weak field from the start, and this guy took it. But I think Dominic's point, I am so fascinated by this about the vetting. Why didn't it occur before? And I totally agree with you. It's going to happen one way or another, and it can destroy his administration.
Let's be honest.
Why didn't it occur?
We know
when
why.
Weiner hit, when the Weiner story broke, and then you had the sub story, which we'll get into, Andrew, with another candidate with a storied sexual past. But I'm not looking at you. I'm looking at your stories. But
Andrew has a storied sexual past.
We don't want to look Weiner. We had the Carlos Danger story one day. Then the woman comes out. Then you had, what else is he doing online?
So you think they were just so consumed with Weiner that de Blasio kind of snuck through?
We can only handle one thing at a time.
But the front runners are under a microscope, number one. Number two, one thing we didn't talk about here, the Campaign Finance Board. Campaign Finance Board told John Liu, you're not getting any money. It shut off his campaign. If he had turned out some of the black and Asian vote, there would have been a runoff. The other thing is the Campaign Finance Board, prior to the Board of Election determining there was 40%, cut off Thompson's funding too.
There was more than just the city, though.
The first analysis, by the way, I've heard that John Liu threw the outcome of this race.
Exactly. So there was more than just the race for mayor.
40%.
Another political giant who was looking for a second act, not named Anthony Weiner, was a name that you remember this year.
Yeah, I went with Eliot Spitzer and his campaign for public advocate this year, and it's primarily because I think he would have won this thing had it not been for Anthony Weiner. I think if Weiner hadn't imploded and gotten everybody in New York thinking, boy, do we really need two of these guys going? And at some point, when does the worm turn on Elliot Spitzer? And by the way, it turns out people were right, because we got the bad news this week about his extramarital affair and his divorce coming up, and that would have been an issue after the election. But you know, all the numbers had Elliot Spitzer winning that race, or the controller's race. Had it not been for Weiner, I think he would have won this election. Again, another one of these situations where I can't remember an equivalent.
Guys, can we all remember, just one second, do you remember Elliot Spitzer? I mean, I remember covering him as the Attorney General when it was like, well, maybe he'll even skip governor and he'll run for president. I mean, he was the biggest rock star going. And he's made the Attorney General of New York one of the best political jobs, period, out there. Then he became governor. Too big for his britches. He tried to burn every bridge because he thought he was God's gift. We all know this. And then all of a sudden the scandals happened. But client number 9. But now you can't win controllers. I mean,
the Spitzer race, by the way, I thought was phenomenal. They jumped in last minute and got on the ballot, and I was the one that challenged against the petitions. I went through all of those things. It was amazing, and nobody else was out there trying to fight and stop him then. And I'm glad he lost. But the other part about that role, everyone forgets, his ads were phenomenal. Jimmy Siegel, the ads that they had done at that point were fabulous, and really, it was like watching McDonald's. The music was the same, the video was a bit of the same. You heard the TV go, and you knew that was a Spitzer ad.
I mean, I agree there was some Weiner fatigue, but I think also Scott Stringer from the start had the establishment Democratic support, and you got in, you know, you look at Spitzer getting in so late. He did a phenomenal job getting the petitions. He bought them, and, you know, illegally.
A few times, I think at times endorsement made a difference.
Yeah, and I think that the Democratic establishment out for Scott Stringer early, there was no way to go. That was a juggernaut. There was no way, I don't think, for Spitzer to get through it.
We all said when Spitzer got in the race, and we saw some of those early numbers, that it was Spitzer's race to lose. And he didn't do anything to lose that race.
But I also think that Scott Stringer had two pretty, I mean, especially that last debate. Scott Stringer performed better than expected, I think, in those debates, and they made a difference.
You went across the river for yours.
Yes, I went to Jersey because I thought that Chris Christie's, you know, did what he needed to do, you know, in terms of getting the numbers that he needed to do to make himself a contender in 2016. So I thought that was an incredible race. And what I also thought was incredible was his Democratic opponent coming out and talking about how she had very little support from her Democratic establishment party, Barbara Bono, in New Jersey. And so, you know, it almost seemed that Christie had all the grounds covered. And I also thought what was fascinating was the way he did the election for senator, you know, what was it, 3 weeks earlier, to, you know, to make sure that the turnout didn't impact him. I mean, he was masterful in that way. And I'm still surprised that his calling of that special election, which cost, what, $24 million for the state, didn't come back to haunt him. So
anyone going away here comfortably.
Bono tried to make headway with that as an issue, and it
didn't stick. And I also think Terry McCulloch in Virginia winning when something no Democrats have done.
Those two, you know,
that's a big race. Yeah.
You know, it's funny. What I think made Christie successful, and has been for 5 years now, or 4+ years in New Jersey, is his authenticity. And I think the perversity is, for me, Christine Quinn. Her collapse in the race for mayor was, as much as de Blasio won, if anybody lost it, sure, Bill Thompson, who we're all fond of here at this table, but Christine Quinn, she stood for nothing. At the end of the day, she had to either say, I'm all in on the Bloomberg legacy and you'll get 4 more years if you vote for me, or not. Or I have a fascinating personal biography and there's possible histories. I'd be the first woman, the first openly gay mayor of New York City, and all of those things, she never made an issue of it. And it was almost like she was trying to say, let me just do nothing, I'll get through the primary, then I'll win.
She was afraid, Richard, of term limits. Term limits was hung around her neck.
But you know what, whether she should or shouldn't have been, Dominic, she was never passionate and for anything. And I think the public, if they don't think anymore in 2013, now almost 14, if you're not for something, you're for nothing, and people are just tired of that.
Let's not forget, one of the reasons that Loda's numbers were so poor, and you took a shot before it, having worked for him, and so forth.
I didn't take a shot.
I wasn't offended necessarily, but what I will just say is this. Christine Quinn's problem was Bloomberg fatigue. They didn't just hang term limits, they hung what it was. It was Bloomberg.
Like Bloomberg
this city feels safer than it's ever felt before. Economically, yes, there's a lot of challenges for the men and women in this city and their families, but they still feel safe and they feel there's a great future ahead of them. And that, a lot of it, whether you like or love or hate Bloomberg, a lot of that's because of him, and they felt safe. They said, you know what? Let's change it up a little bit for things we believe in, because all those other things we usually vote on are perfectly fine.
And I think she made the same mistake that Hillary Clinton did in the 2008 election, which is she thought she had this thing sewn up. She was going to run a general election race. Hillary Clinton's best moment was at the end of that race when she knew she was going to lose to Obama. And the same thing with Christine Quinn, although she didn't make a comeback like Hillary Clinton did. You've got to run the race you're running, and she wasn't running a primary race. And so she was almost blindsided by de Blasio, Weiner, Lou, and everybody else in the race.
Richard, I agree. To go back to your point on Christie, I hear you, but that's the only thing I disagree with you about. I understand that he's been out there, Mr. Man.
By the way, I knew even if I got around to that, he'd come back to Christie. We've been debating this for the past year.
Mr. 2016. But guess what? That gravy train, Governor, is coming to an end.
What are you saying about gravy train, the Governor here? I don't know where you're going down. All right. Up next, how will you remember 2013? Certainly where politics are concerned, this man will factor in, but the question is, why? Our panel sounds off straight ahead.